The sky over the Arizona desert had been bright and calm when Daniel Hart began his hike that afternoon. He had checked the weather report twice before leaving his truck, and both times it had promised a clear day with only a slight chance of evening rain. For a photographer, that kind of light was a gift, soft, warm, and made for capturing the shapes of the land. So Daniel walked deep into the open desert with confidence, carrying only what he needed for a few hours of exploring. His backpack held his camera, 2 lenses, a bottle of water, and a small snack. Nothing more. The desert stretched forever in every direction. Flat land rose into gentle hills, and hills rose into rocky ledges. Cactus plants stood scattered like silent guards of the land. Dry grass brushed against Daniel's legs each time a light breeze passed. He walked slowly, taking photos of small things most people would never notice. Patterns in stone. A lizard warming itself on a rock. The shape of a cloud drifting overhead. He felt calm out there, a kind of peace he had been searching for these past few years. Sometimes the world felt loud and heavy, but not here. Here, the only sound was the soft crunch of the ground beneath his boots. 2 hours passed without Daniel realizing it. He was so focused on the world through his camera lens that the rest of the desert faded into the background. It was only when the breeze sharpened cooler, faster that he lowered his camera and looked toward the horizon. His heart skipped. A dark line stretched across the far edge of the sky, growing wider and taller as it moved. Heavy clouds were forming, the kind that build quickly during monsoon season, the kind that bring sudden storms. Daniel frowned. This wasn't what the forecast predicted at all. Those clouds weren't passing by, they were coming straight toward him. He checked his phone, hoping for guidance, but there was no signal. Out on the wide mesa, that wasn't unusual. Still, it meant he couldn't track the storm or call anyone if he needed help. He tried to tell himself the clouds might drift another direction, but the wind changed again, this time stronger, pushing warm desert air past him as if warning him to move. He looked around. He had walked far from his truck. Even if he started back right away, it would take at least 40 minutes to reach it. Maybe longer, if the shifting sand made the ground slippery. And those clouds were rolling fast now. Much too fast. A low rumble echoed across the land. Not sharp, not frightening, just a reminder that the storm was growing. Daniel took a slow breath. He didn't want to run blindly across the uneven ground. And he didn't want to panic. He only needed shelter, something solid enough to protect him, until the rain passed. Many desert storms hit hard but ended quickly. If he could just find something to wait in for half an hour or so, he would be fine. He turned in a circle, scanning the landscape. Nothing but rocks, brush, and open desert. Then, far to his right, near a cluster of old juniper trees, he saw it something round, low, and shaped like a dome. At first he thought it was another rock, but the shape was too smooth, too even. As he stepped closer, the details became clearer. A frame of bent wooden branches formed its skeleton, covered with layers of dried material that blended with the earth around it. It wasn't new, but it wasn't falling apart either. It looked like an old Apache shelter, the kind built to stand for years even through harsh winds. He hesitated. He didn't want to enter anything that belonged to someone without permission. But the wind was now picking up dust, and the first drops of rain hit his arm large. Warm drops that meant heavier rain was seconds away. Daniel decided he would simply stay at the entrance or step inside only if necessary. He would treat the place with respect. For now, he just needed safety. He hurried toward the shelter, shielding his camera bag with his hands. The rain suddenly poured as if someone had opened a faucet in the sky. Thunder rolled louder this time, though still far enough to feel safe. The desert dust turned to mud around his boots. His clothes soaked through within moments. By the time he reached the shelter's opening, he was already out of breath. He pushed aside a curtain made of woven plant fibers and stepped inside. He expected darkness, emptiness, a quiet place to sit and wait. Instead, he froze. Someone was already there. A young woman sat near the far side of the shelter, her dark hair braided neatly over one shoulder and her clothes lightly sprinkled with dust. She looked calm, not frightened by the storm at all. She had clearly been there for some time, maybe resting, maybe waiting for the weather to clear. But Daniel had not expected anyone, not out here, not in the middle of such open land. The woman lifted her head slowly and looked at him. Her expression wasn't surprised, but curious. Her eyes were steady, almost studying him. Daniel felt suddenly aware of the water dripping from his clothes and forming a small puddle at his feet. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, raising his hands a little to show he meant no harm. "I didn't know anyone was inside. There's a storm, and I needed a place to stay dry." The woman continued to watch him for a quiet moment. Then she offered a small nod, gentle but reserved. It wasn't exactly an invitation, but it also wasn't a request for him to leave. Daniel took that as a sign he wasn't unwelcome. He stepped to one side of the shelter, leaving a wide space between them. The inside smelled of dry wood, earth, and the faint scent of herbs, something calming. Rain hammered the outside now, strong enough to make the shelter's branches tremble lightly. Daniel let out a slow breath of relief. He noticed the woman wore a small pouch at her waist, likely used for gathering plants. On her lap rested a bundle of desert herbs, tied with a thin cord. He realized she must have been collecting them when the storm caught her too. Her presence made sense. This was her land, her people's land, and this shelter was clearly built by skilled hands. She dropped her gaze back to the herbs, adjusting the cord gently. Daniel didn't dare speak again right away. He didn't want to invade her space or ask something that might feel disrespectful. He simply sat near the entrance, listening to the storm's changing rhythm. The shelter creaked softly with each gust of wind, but held firm. He felt safe for the moment. Minutes passed in quiet. Daniel's heartbeat finally slowed. He wiped water from his forehead and glanced around the shelter. It was simple, but strong, built to blend with the land, rather than stand apart from it. The branches were tied with careful wraps, every knot placed with purpose. He admired the craftsmanship. It was clear this wasn't just any structure. It held history, culture, and meaning. His attention returned to the woman. She was young, maybe around his age, with an air of calm confidence. There was something peaceful about the way she sat, as if she belonged to the rhythm of the desert itself. For a moment, Daniel wondered who she was and whether he had intruded on something important. He opened his mouth to apologize again, but before he could speak, the woman looked up. Her voice was soft, but clear. "The storms move fast here," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, I didn't expect this one." She gave a faint smile, almost knowing. "They rarely warn you." Outside, the rain continued to fall in sheets, and distant thunder softened into a low hum. Inside, the air felt warmer. Though they were strangers, sharing the same space brought a quiet sense of connection. A moment neither of them had planned, but both were now part of. Daniel looked toward the opening where the curtain swayed gently in the wind. The storm wasn't ending anytime soon. But somehow, being in this shelter with the young woman didn't feel strange anymore. It felt like he had stepped into a story he didn't yet understand. A story the desert itself had chosen to place him in. And this was only the beginning. The rain outside softened for a brief moment, but the wind still pushed against the walls of the shelter. Daniel listened to the steady rhythm, unsure what to do next. He didn't want to stare at the young woman or make her uncomfortable. Yet silence felt heavy too. He glanced around again, noticing details he had missed earlier: the neat arrangement of herbs tied in bunches, a small woven mat rolled in the corner, and a water gourd placed carefully near her side. Everything inside had been placed with care, like someone who respected both the space and what it meant. The woman looked up briefly, as if sensing his quiet thoughts. Her eyes were dark and calm, the kind that seemed to understand more than they said. She studied him for a moment, his soaked clothes, his camera bag clutched protectively, his slightly nervous posture before returning her attention to the herbs in her lap. Feeling the silence stretching too long, Daniel cleared his throat softly. "Thank you for letting me stay here," he said. "I didn't want to intrude. I really didn't know anyone was inside." "You're not intruding," the woman said, her voice gentle but composed. "Storms come without warning. Anyone would look for shelter." Her words eased Daniel's worry. He nodded gratefully. Another gust of wind rattled the outer branches. The curtain at the entrance fluttered, allowing a brief flash of pale light to enter. Daniel pulled his backpack closer and checked his camera inside. Fortunately, it was dry. He let out a quiet sigh of relief. The woman noticed. "You came out here for pictures?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes. I'm a photographer. I travel to different places to capture nature. Today I wanted pictures of the desert before sunset. I guess the weather had other plans." A small, soft smile touched her lips. Not wide, but warm enough to let him know she understood. "You can think the day will stay calm, and then it changes suddenly." Daniel leaned back lightly against the frame of the shelter. "It's beautiful, though. Even now, with the storm, maybe especially now." She looked at him more carefully this time, as if weighing whether his words were sincere. Then, she nodded once again. "It is beautiful," she agreed. "But it can also be challenging if you don't know its ways." Daniel hesitated. "You know this land well, don't you?" "Yes," she replied simply. There was no pride in her voice, no need to explain. The truth of it was clear in her posture, in her calmness during the storm, in the way she understood the desert's rhythm, the way others understood the flow of a familiar city street. Daniel wanted to ask more about her, but he reminded himself to be patient. She had already shown him more openness than he expected after he barged into her quiet space unannounced. Instead, he offered a small introduction. "My name is Daniel," he said. "Daniel Hart." The woman paused, tying a thin cord around the herbs with steady fingers. "Ayana," she replied. The name settled gently between them like a soft piece of cloth. Daniel repeated it once in his mind, so he wouldn't forget. Outside, the storm returned with renewed strength. The rain grew louder, drumming against the shelter with steady force. Ayana glanced toward the entrance, but she didn't seem worried. She continued working with her herbs, her movements calm and practiced. "What are those for?" Daniel asked, unable to contain his curiosity. "Medicine," she answered. "Some for healing the body, some for helping with rest. My grandmother taught me how to prepare them." "That's amazing," Daniel said honestly. "I've always admired people who learn things passed down from their families." Ayana lifted her head again, her eyes thoughtful. "Traditions carry stories," she said softly. "Each plant, each method, each teaching, all of it comes from someone before us. When we use them, we remember them." Daniel listened with interest, appreciating the quiet wisdom in her words. He found himself wanting to hear more about her family, about her land, about how she learned to move so comfortably in a place that felt overwhelming to him. "Are you alone out here?" he asked gently. "Not really," she said. "My people live not far from here. I walked a short distance to collect these herbs. The storm just came sooner than I expected." Daniel nodded. That explained her calmness. She wasn't lost or stranded. She knew exactly where she was. Another gust of wind pushed against the shelter, causing a quiet groan from the branches. Instinctively, Daniel straightened, but Ayana didn't seem startled at all. She placed her herbs to the side and reached for a small woven basket she had brought with her. "You're not used to storms like this," she observed. "Not at all," Daniel admitted with a tiny laugh. "Where I live, Storms are predictable. Slow. You can see them coming hours before. This one, it just appeared. That's how desert storms behave, she said. They come fast, and they leave fast. But while they stay, they demand respect. Daniel smiled. I definitely respect it now. Ayanna didn't laugh, but she offered an expression that was almost amused. She sat a little straighter, shifting to a more comfortable position while the wind hummed around them. What brought you to this land? She asked suddenly, turning the conversation toward him. Daniel hesitated. The question was simple, but the truth behind it was not. He looked down at his hands for a moment, feeling the weight of his own memories pressing behind his thoughts. I guess, he began slowly, I was looking for something quiet, something peaceful. I used to travel with my older brother. We would explore places like this together. After he passed away last year, I stopped going anywhere for a while. Everything felt too heavy. Weak? Ayanna's face softened, not with pity, but with understanding. So you came here to feel close to the things you used to share? Daniel nodded, grateful she understood so easily. Yes. I thought the desert might help me find that feeling again. I've taken trips before, but something about this place felt right. I didn't know why at first. And now? She asked. He looked around the shelter, at the storm outside, at the woman sitting across from him, as if this moment were part of a story written long before either of them arrived. Now, he said quietly, it feels like I was meant to be here today. Ayanna didn't respond right away. She simply studied him with calm eyes, as though she could see the layers of truth behind his words. Then, she dipped her head slightly in acknowledgement. The desert brings people where they need to be, she said. More time passed, comfortably this time. The storm shifted again, still steady, but not as heavy as before. The shelter felt warm, protected, almost like a small world separate from everything outside. Ayanna reached into her basket and took out a small cloth pouch. She opened it and revealed dried leaves with a gentle scent. Would you like some tea? She asked. Daniel blinked, surprised. You can make tea in here? She nodded. Not a hot tea, but this can be mixed with water. It helps people calm their thoughts. It's simple. Daniel accepted with a grateful smile. She handed him the pouch, and he mixed a pinch of the leaves into his water bottle. The taste was earthy, soft, and strangely grounding. Ayanna watched quietly, as if making sure he liked it. He nodded in appreciation. It's really good. Ayanna seemed pleased. More minutes drifted by. The steady rain created a gentle, soothing sound. And the air inside the shelter grew warmer, filled with the scent of herbs and earth. The earlier tension between them faded entirely. They were strangers, yet not strangers. They were sharing a moment the storm had created, a moment neither could have planned. Daniel looked at Ayanna again, feeling a quiet curiosity. She seemed like someone who carried years of learning in her heart, someone connected deeply to her home. Her presence made the shelter feel less like an accident and more like a place he was meant to find. He didn't know it yet, but this meeting was going to change his journey in ways he couldn't imagine. The storm outside had brought him into her shelter, but something else, something unexplainable, kept him there. And the longer they sat together, the more Daniel felt that this encounter was only the start of something important. The storm continued outside, but inside the small Apache shelter, the air felt warmer and calmer than before. Ayanna sat quietly, while Daniel sipped the herbal water she had given him. The drink had a gentle taste, soft and earthy, and it made his chest feel lighter in a way he couldn't fully explain. The sound of rain tapping on the shelter's wooden frame added a rhythm that made the moment feel almost peaceful. He looked at Ayanna again. She had gone back to arranging some plants, but her posture was relaxed now. Not guarded, like earlier. The storm had brought them into the same space, but the calm inside made it easier to speak. Daniel decided to break the quiet. "You said your grandmother taught you about the plants," he began gently. "Did she teach you everything here?" Ayana nodded slowly. "She taught me many things," she replied, "about the land, the plants, the seasons, and the stories that come from our ancestors. She said the land remembers everything, and it shares its memory with those who listen." Daniel listened with interest. "Stories about the land," he repeated. "What kind of stories?" Ayana hesitated at first, as if deciding whether he was someone who would listen with respect. But something in Daniel's expression seemed to reassure her, so she placed her herbs aside and shifted slightly, settling into a more comfortable posture as she began to speak. "There is a story," she said softly, "about how storms are not just weather, but messengers. My grandmother said they remind us that everything changes, everything moves, and everything has a purpose, even if we do not see it yet." Daniel leaned a little closer without realizing it. "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was," Ayana said with a faint, sad but warm smile. "She always told me that people sometimes mistake storms for trouble. But in our traditions, storms can bring guidance too. They clear the old things away, so new things can begin." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's beautiful. And true. Sometimes life feels like a storm too." Ayana looked at him quietly, sensing the deeper meaning behind his words. She didn't push him to talk, but the silence she offered wasn't empty. It felt safe. Daniel exhaled slowly. "After my brother passed," he said quietly, "I felt like everything inside me was shaking, like a storm that wouldn't end." Ayana listened without interrupting. Her calm presence helped the words come easier. "He and I used to travel together," Daniel continued. "We explored forests, deserts, mountains, everywhere. After he was gone, I stopped going anywhere for a while. It didn't feel right without him. And when I finally tried to travel again, it felt like everything reminded me of him." Ayana's voice was soft when she spoke. Daniel nodded. "Yes, it does." He looked down at his hands, feeling the memories come back, some heavy, some warm. The storm outside seemed to echo quietly with the rhythm of his thoughts. Ayana waited until he lifted his head again before she spoke. "When someone important leaves this world," she said gently, "their spirit doesn't disappear. It becomes part of the land, the sky, the wind. My grandmother believed that the world carries their memory and shows it to us in small moments." Daniel's eyes softened. "I'd like to believe that," he said. Ayana nodded slowly. "Maybe that's why you came here," she said. "Maybe the land wanted to show you something." Daniel paused, absorbing her words. They didn't feel strange or mystical, they felt strangely right. "Maybe," he replied quietly. Ayana reached into her basket and pulled out a long feather with soft brown edges. She didn't hand it to him, but she let him see it. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said. "She used it for ceremonies and blessings. She said feathers remind us that even things we can't see, like wind, still guide us." Daniel admired the feather from afar, feeling honored that she shared such a personal item with him. "That's really meaningful," he said sincerely. Ayana returned the feather to her basket carefully and looked at him again. "What drew you to photography?" she asked. Daniel smiled slightly, glad for the change in direction. "My brother and I started when we were young," he said. "We would take pictures of small things like insects, leaves, shadows. We didn't even have a good camera back then, but we loved capturing moments. It felt like we could keep them forever." Ayana nodded with understanding. "Pictures do carry memories," she said. "They help people remember feelings, not just places." "Exactly," Daniel said. "Sometimes I take pictures just so I don't forget how a moment felt." Ayana studied him thoughtfully. And what do you hope to take a picture of here? In this desert? Daniel looked around the small shelter, listening to the quiet hum of the rain. His eyes returned to her. I wanted to capture the beauty of the land, he said. But now, I think I'm supposed to capture something more. Ayana raised an eyebrow slightly, curious. More? Daniel didn't smile, but his eyes held warmth. Maybe the feeling this place gives. Or the stories you told me. Or the connection people have to this land. I don't know yet. But it feels important. Ayana didn't say anything right away, but she didn't look away either. Something softened in her expression, something warm and thoughtful. The rain outside eased a little, becoming lighter, almost gentle. The wind slowed down too, allowing the shelter to settle into peaceful stillness. The storm wasn't gone yet, but it was taking a breath just like the two of them. Ayana pulled one knee up and wrapped an arm loosely around it. She looked comfortable now, more relaxed than when Daniel first burst into the shelter. Would you like to hear another story? She asked softly. Daniel brightened. Yes, I'd really like that. Ayana tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and began. There is a story my tribe shares, she said, about how people come into each other's lives at the right moment. Sometimes the meeting is simple, sometimes surprising, sometimes strange. But it always has meaning, even if we don't understand it at the time. Daniel listened with full attention. Once, she continued, a traveler wandered into the desert. He lost his way and feared he wouldn't make it back. But the land showed him small signs, shadows, footprints, a distant wind. He followed them, not knowing where they led. And those signs brought him to someone who helped him. Someone who changed the direction of his life. Daniel breathed slowly. Did they become friends? Ayana smiled softly. The story doesn't say. It only says their meeting was meant to happen. Daniel gazed at her quietly, and Ayana returned the look without turning away. The moment held a gentle meaning. Neither of them needed to speak out loud. The rain slowed even more, turning into a soft drizzle. Light filtered through the entrance curtain, giving the shelter a golden glow. Daniel felt a calm he hadn't felt in a very long time. He wasn't sure if it came from the shelter, the desert, the storm, or Ayana herself. Maybe all of them. After a long moment of silence, Ayana spoke again. Sometimes people come to the desert to find answers, she said. But sometimes, they come to the desert because the desert has something to show them. Something they didn't know they needed. Daniel felt her words settle inside him like warm light. He knew she wasn't just speaking about travelers and stories anymore. He nodded slowly. Yes, he murmured. I think you're right. Outside, the storm began to fade. Inside, the connection between them grew stronger, built not by chance, but by the quiet shared stories of the land and the gentle honesty between two strangers, brought together by the rain. Daniel didn't know what the next part of the day would bring. But he knew one thing for sure. This shelter, this storm, and this unexpected meeting were now a part of his journey in a way he would never forget. And the story was only just beginning. The rain softened to a gentle whisper, but the storm clouds still hung heavy in the sky. The world outside the shelter looked washed, muted, and blurred through the curtain of drizzle. Inside, the air had grown warmer, filled with the peaceful scent of herbs and damp earth. Daniel felt calmer than he had in months, maybe years. But the quiet moment did not last long. A sudden crack echoed from above them, a sharp sound that startled both Daniel and Ayana. The shelter shuddered slightly, as if something heavy had struck its outer frame. Daniel sat upright, glancing toward the roof with concern. What was that? He asked. Ayana listened with her head tilted, her expression focused. A branch, she said calmly. The storm loosened many of them. One must have fallen, but another creak followed, louder this time. The shelter didn't look like it would collapse, but the small shifts in the frame made Daniel uneasy. Ayana stood slowly and moved toward the side where the sound came from. She touched one of the bent wooden supports, feeling its firmness. "It's strong," she said softly, "but it needs help until the wind settles." She walked outside the shelter's entrance, lifting the curtain just enough to step out. The rain had slowed to a mist, but the ground was muddy and uneven. Daniel hesitated for only a second before stepping out after her. The air felt cooler, and the sky glowed with a faint silver light behind the clouds. Ayana bent down and picked up a long fallen branch. She tested its strength by pressing it gently against the ground. "This will help," she said. Daniel walked toward her. "Let me help too." Ayana nodded, accepting his offer without argument. They worked together, lifting the branch and placing it carefully against the shelter's outer wall to support the weakened frame. The wood was heavier than Daniel expected, slippery from the rain, but Ayana guided him with a steady calmness. "Higher," she said softly. "Just a little." Daniel adjusted his grip, and together they slid the branch into place. The shelter steadied instantly. Ayana stepped back and studied their work. "Good." Daniel smiled lightly. "You're good at this." "I've helped repair many shelters," she said, brushing her hands clean. "Everyone learns these skills when they grow up here." Daniel admired her confidence. She was not only graceful, but capable. Someone who understood both the land and how to care for what belonged to it. Another gust of wind came. But this time, the shelter held firmly. The rain eased even more, and the air felt fresher. Daniel breathed in deeply, feeling rewarded by their teamwork. Ayana turned to him. "We should check the other side," she said. They walked around the shelter together. The ground squished beneath their boots, and small puddles reflected the pale sky. Ayana pointed to another spot, where the structure sagged slightly. Daniel found another fallen branch nearby and carried it over. They worked together again, slipping into an easy rhythm. It surprised Daniel how natural it felt to help her. They didn't need many words. Ayana guided with gestures or short instructions, and he followed without hesitation. The quiet connection between them seemed to grow stronger with each shared task. When the work was finally done, they stepped back to admire the shelter, now braced and steady. The storm had weakened, and the clouds were slowly drifting apart. A faint glow of late afternoon light peeked through. "It should last until the storm fully passes," Ayana said. Daniel nodded, wiping rain from his forehead. "I'm glad we were able to fix it." Ayana looked at him, her eyes calm but warm. "Thank you for helping." "You don't have to thank me," Daniel replied. "You taught me what to do, and it felt good to do something useful." Ayana brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Many people would not have helped." Daniel tilted his head. "I find that hard to believe." She gave a small, thoughtful smile. "Some people only think of shelter as protection for themselves. But here, it is also a responsibility. What we use, we must care for." Her words made sense to Daniel. He admired the way her people respected the land and the things they built. Everything had meaning. Everything had purpose. They stepped back inside the shelter, now much stronger than before. The air inside felt different, lighter, more open, after their work together. Daniel sat on the same spot as before, but Ayana sat a little closer this time, as if the shared effort had closed the distance between them. "You work well with your hands," she said. "Not everyone knows how to move so carefully." Daniel laughed softly. "I think I was just trying not to mess up." "You didn't," she said simply. "You were patient." Daniel smiled, enjoying the gentle praise more than he expected. Ayana picked up her basket again, but did not begin arranging the herbs. Instead, she looked toward the entrance of the shelter, listening to the fading rain. She seemed thoughtful, almost concerned. "My people might be searching for me," she said quietly. They watch the weather closely. When storms come suddenly, they check on those who are outside. Daniel straightened. Should we go find them? Ayanna shook her head. The ground is slippery. Flash floods may have changed the paths. It is safer to wait until the rain stops completely. Daniel nodded, trusting her judgment. She knew these lands far better than he did. But not even a minute later, a distant call carried through the air. Ayanna froze slightly, her face shifting in recognition. Another voice followed, closer this time. They're looking for you, Daniel said gently. Ayanna stood. She brushed off her clothes and stepped toward the shelter's entrance. Come, she said. Daniel followed her outside. The rain had become a soft drizzle. Almost gone. The world looked fresher, with clean air and a faint glow returning to the horizon. A group of figures appeared in the distance, walking between the juniper trees. As they approached, Daniel noticed their steady movements and calm presence. Ayanna lifted her hand in a quiet signal. One of the figures broke into a slightly faster pace, an older man dressed in simple but traditional clothing. His face showed relief the moment he saw her. Ayanna, he said, his tone gentle but full of concern as he reached them. I'm fine, she replied, with respect in her voice. The man noticed Daniel standing beside her. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in careful evaluation. He studied Daniel's soaked clothes, the mud on his boots, the tired but peaceful look on his face. Daniel swallowed and straightened respectfully. Hello, he said, his voice steady. I took shelter in the wickiup. I didn't know she was inside. When part of it weakened in the storm, we repaired it together. Ayanna nodded gently. The older man's expression softened a little. He nodded to Daniel. Thank you, he said, his voice deep and calm. The shelters are important to us. Helping care for one shows respect for the land. Daniel felt a warm sense of relief wash over him. More members of Ayanna's community arrived, forming a small circle around them. Some carried blankets, others carried water. They greeted Ayanna with quiet warmth. They looked at Daniel with curiosity, but none seemed unkind. Ayanna's father, Daniel, now realized this must be him, studied the sky. The storm is ending, he said. We should go back before nightfall. The paths are slick. He turned to Daniel. Your vehicle is far from here? Yes, Daniel said. About a mile or so. Ayanna stepped closer. I can guide him, she said. The land shifted. He might not find the right way. That's with rebuild it. The land shifted. The land shifted. The land shifted. Her father hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he nodded. Go together. We will follow. Daniel felt something warm in his chest at her offer. Ayanna gave him a small, reassuring smile before motioning for him to walk with her. As they moved across the wet desert, with the soft light touching the land and the storm fading behind them, Daniel realized the truth. The storm had brought trouble, yes, but it had also brought him to Ayanna. And this meeting, this connection, was only becoming stronger. The rain had almost stopped by the time Daniel and Ayanna began walking across the damp desert. Soft light filtered through thinning clouds, giving the land a gentle glow. The puddles reflected small pieces of sky, and the air felt fresh and cool. Ayanna walked ahead with steady steps, her boots making soft sounds in the wet sand. Daniel followed close enough to hear her breath and the quiet sway of her basket. Behind them, her people walked at a respectful distance, watching over them as they moved through the open land. Daniel felt calm, even with so many new faces nearby. Something about Ayanna's presence made him feel safe, as if he belonged in that moment. The rain always changes the paths, Ayanna said, pointing ahead. You see that dry riverbed? Before the storm, it was smooth. Now it's deeper. The water shaped it. Daniel nodded, amazed at how quickly the land changed. It's beautiful, he said softly. Ayana's eyes warmed with a small smile. The desert is always teaching, she said. They walked a little longer until the ground rose gently toward the place where Daniel had left his truck. He could see it at a distance now, mud-splashed, a little crooked from where the rain had softened the ground beneath its tires, but thankfully, still there. Daniel breathed out in relief. I'm glad it didn't wash away. Ayana let out a soft laugh, quiet but genuine. It's strong, like you, she said lightly. It waited. Her words made Daniel smile in a way he hadn't smiled in a long time. Warm, natural, unforced. As they reached the truck, Ayana's people caught up. They spoke quietly among themselves, their tones calm and gentle. Ayana's father stepped forward. You found your way, he said to Daniel. Thanks to your daughter. Daniel replied respectfully. Ayana lowered her eyes modestly, but a faint smile touched her lips. Her father studied Daniel for a moment more, then nodded. The group began arranging themselves in a loose circle near Daniel's truck, and for a moment he thought it was their way of preparing to say goodbye. But then, Ayana's father looked at him with a thoughtful expression. Before you go, he said, you are welcome to join us this evening. We gather by the fire to share stories and food. The storm gives us reason to give thanks. Daniel blinked in surprise. You're inviting me? Yes, the chief said. Ayana tells us you were respectful. That is enough. Daniel felt a warmth rise in his chest, gratitude mixed with something deeper. He glanced at Ayana. She gave him a small nod, encouraging him. I would be honored, Daniel said. They guided him slowly toward their community area, not far from the shelter where the storm had pushed him earlier. The ground grew firmer as they walked, and the sky opened up more, revealing patches of soft gold light. When they reached the gathering place, Daniel saw simple homes built with care, children running around with bright smiles, and older members sitting near a central fire pit where smoke curled gently into the sky. Everything felt peaceful, connected, full of life. He felt like he had stepped into the heart of the desert itself. Ayana led him to the circle near the fire. Members of her community welcomed him with small nods and warm eyes. No one treated him like an outsider. Instead, they acted as if he had naturally become part of the evening. Ayana sat beside him, her presence steady and comforting. As the fire grew stronger, people began sharing stories, some about the storm, some about the land, and some about lessons passed down from older generations. Ayana's father spoke with a clear, calm voice, telling them how storms reminded people of the strength in unity, the importance of protecting each other, and the quiet ways nature teaches patience. Daniel listened in awe, each story touching something inside him he hadn't known was waiting to be healed. For a moment, he felt a strange but welcome sense of belonging, like the land itself had wrapped him in warmth. When it was his turn to speak, he hesitated, but Ayana gave him a gentle nod. So he opened his heart. He told them about his travels, his love for capturing beautiful moments, and how he used to explore natural places with his brother. He explained how he had been searching for meaning, for peace, for a direction after losing someone so important. The fire's glow danced on everyone's faces as they listened quietly, respectfully. Finally, he said, today, I thought I was running from a storm, but maybe the storm was guiding me towards something I needed. Ayana's eyes softened, and her father nodded in understanding. One of the elders spoke kindly. Sometimes the desert brings people together, so they may learn from each other. Daniel smiled at that, feeling the truth in the words. After the stories ended, people shared food, warm bread, seasoned vegetables, and herbs that smelled comforting and rich. Daniel enjoyed every bite, not just because of the taste, but because he felt cared for. It had been a long time since he experienced such simple warmth. The sky grew darker, sprinkled with early stars. The fire glowed brighter, and soft conversation filled the air. Ayana stood and walked a few steps away. Daniel followed, drawn by the quiet strength in her presence. She looked up at the sky. "The stars will be bright tonight," she said. "Storms make the air clear." Daniel nodded. "Thank you. For today. For everything. You helped me too," she said gently. "You listened. You cared. And you respected our home." Daniel felt something shift in his chest, a soft, hopeful feeling he couldn't name. Ayanna reached into her basket and pulled out a small charm made of woven fibers and decorated with tiny beads. It was simple, but beautiful, shaped like a small spiral that reminded Daniel of wind swirling in the desert. "This is for you," she said quietly. Daniel blinked. "You're giving this to me?" "It is a reminder," she said softly. "Of this place. Of today. Of storms that bring unexpected paths." Daniel held the charm carefully, touched beyond words. "I'll treasure it," he said. "Truly." Ayanna smiled, warm and sincere. They stood together for a long moment, watching the sky grow darker and the first stars appear. The desert felt calm again, as if the storm had never existed. But for Daniel, everything had changed. He knew that when he drove away the next morning, he would not leave empty-hearted. He would take with him the stories, the warmth of the fire circle, the memory of Ayanna's guidance, and the quiet truth that storms both in life and in nature could lead people to unexpected places. He looked at Ayanna one more time, and she looked back at him with gentle eyes. Whatever the future held, this moment would stay with him always. The desert had brought them together, and the storm had given him something he never expected, a new beginning.